Hey, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. Francis asked me to talk about the intersection between Hollywood and Silicon Valley. Well, that's a really big topic to cover in 13 minutes. So I'm only going to cover a really small slice of it, just based on where my career has intersected with Hollywood and Silicon Valley. And it'll only be glimpses. There won't be any big future-looking statements. It'll really be more about just some anecdotes that I've had in my brief time in the business. So I got started my career at an investment bank in San Francisco that catered to high-tech companies. We were involved in taking companies like AOL and Intuit public. But one of our most notable clients was a company called Pixar. And we took that company public back in the day. And it was our firm that actually coined the term Sillywood, Silicon Valley and Hollywood. Most of our clients were in the area of video games. And this really was the front line where Hollywood and Silicon Valley interacted back in the 1990s. One of our clients, Spectrum Holobyte, had the rights to Star Trek: The Next Generation. And when we took that company public, the company actually created a virtual avatar of Captain Jean-Luc Picard and used it to actually introduce the company at these meetings to investment banks and Wall Street folks in New York City. So we had Jean-Luc Picard as the opening act for these meetings. And this was actually quite a revelation to folks on Wall Street at the time, because back then they were still using 35 millimeter color transparencies for presentations. Nowadays, I'm advising tech and film companies on various ventures. So I'm currently helping British actor Gary Oldman's production company on a movie about the very first great inventor from Stanford, back when the place was still horse country. Gary Oldman has been fascinated, obsessed with the story of this photographer who invented motion pictures in Palo Alto in 1878. So the movie industry was born in Silicon Valley. This is the first movie that was ever shot. And that's the first movie projector that the inventor created. And the first movie shown was actually on Nob Hill at the mansion of Leland Stanford. So Gary Oldman, he loves the story. He wrote the screenplay, he's going to direct it, and he's going to star as the lead character. The way I got into film finance was after I had sold my company to Alibaba a few years ago. And, this is Jack Ma up there. He's quite a rock star, the richest man in China. And so one of the things that he is doing in China is actually in the area of movie production. I worked at Alibaba for a few years and then decided to go on a reading vacation. It took me about 9 months, but I was on the search for a book or novel that would make a good movie. And while I was in Santa Cruz on a weekend, I visited a bookstore and saw some books that were laid out on the employees' favorites table. And I said, okay, I'll check some of these out. And I picked up a book, which was called The White Boats. And I was immediately captivated by the story. And I read the book, the entire book, in one night. And I had not read a entire book in one night since the Da Vinci Code. Now, luckily, this book was pretty thin. It was more of a kind of Ernest Hemingway type novella. So I reached out to the writer and commissioned got the movie rights to his book, and then I commissioned him to write a screenplay. So I'm currently working with Barry Osborne who was the producer of The Lord of the Rings and The Matrix. He's helping me with the project. Barry's the guy in the center photograph on the left holding his Best Picture Oscar with Peter Jackson. And Barry, he loves stories that follow a hero's journey. And so we're looking forward to a really great film project. Now, Barry, he is actually located in the Bay Area, although he has shot many films in Australia and New Zealand. He actually lives up in Mill Valley. And there's a great filmmaking tradition in Silicon Valley, in the Bay Area. You know, you have Pixar, you have Lucasfilm, ILM, you have Francis Ford Coppola, you have the filmmakers who did Amadeus and, you know, The Right Stuff. Cinema by the Bay. As I mentioned, movie technology had been invented down at Stanford in 1878, and the movie industry, the business, the studio business, actually got its start in Alameda County, Northern California, not Southern California. And the biggest star of the silent movie era, Charlie Chaplin, he made his movies in Niles Canyon, which is not far from Fremont, just less than 25 miles from here. So Silicon Valley is the historic home of the movie business. From there, after doing my time in investment banking, I went to work for a guy named John Kluge, who's pictured here on this Forbes cover. And John was a media mogul. He owned over 200 companies, and these were companies such as Fox TV stations, Orion Pictures, Samuel Goldwyn, as well as Cellular One. So I worked in his investment office and got a taste for both high tech as well as the movie making business. And on Wall Street, the bankers call this sector TMT, for telecom, media, and technology, convergence. So John Kluge was really one of the first people that got involved in this convergence. He owned the largest network of TV stations, which he sold to Rupert Murdoch for billions of dollars. That became the core of the Fox network. So there wouldn't be a Homer Simpson if it weren't for this gentleman. And then, I don't know if that's a good or bad thing, by the way. And then Orion, Cellular One was the largest network of cellular companies in the nation, had one of the biggest networks, and Kluge sold those markets to AT&T Wireless for, again, billions of dollars. And this made John Kluge actually the richest man in America for a few years, right before Bill Gates came out with Windows 3.0, which enabled Microsoft to blow everyone else away. But before then, it was John Kluge who was kind of the media mogul, and just a remarkable man. He actually gave Ang Lee his first big break on American movie screens, because Samuel Goldwyn was the studio that distributed Ang Lee's movies, like The Wedding Banquet and Eat, Drink, Man, Woman. So with all of these media entertainment companies, all of that was really built on top of the fortune that John Kluge created in technology with Cellular One and other companies. So I spent a couple of years in New York working in the media business, and then I came back out here to get a business degree down at Stanford. And while I was in school, I met a startup in Palo Alto that was developing 360-degree video technology. And this is a picture of the camera that we had developed back in the year 2000. It's a camera that can actually record everything around it, not just 360 degrees, but also top and bottom. And so this technology was pretty cutting edge. And the problem with technology that's cutting edge is that where's the market, right? What's the application? And so we had to go out and actually find that market, find what would be the application. And it dawned on us that that was the application that we thought would bring 360-degree video to the masses. Remember Britney Spears?
Video for the home entertainment market gives people more control over the viewing experience.
So as you can see, he's using a PlayStation 2 controller to actually pan around this video of Britney giving her homecoming concert at the Louisiana Superdome back in year 2000. And Britney was, basically everywhere that year. She was the highest grossing artist in the world, Forbes #1 entertainer in terms of revenues generated. She was on TV, radio, MTV. She was selling out concerts. But the one area that she was not in was video games. And every video game company had already approached her. And it wasn't until my startup came along with this technology, and we pitched it to her as something that would be able to be true to her personality, her performance, and her persona. And she loved it. And so we entered into a 3-way partnership with another video game company that would write the check to actually make the project come to fruition. And they came out with this game, Britney's Dance Beat. It was going to be that publisher, THQ's #1 title going into Christmas 2001. We were so excited. And the big day came for the release. Our press release went out 5 a.m. New York time on September 11th, 2001. So after 9/11, there was a bit of a mini recession, and we had already spent our advance payment against royalties that never developed. And so we had to actually shut down the business soon thereafter. And the technology ended up in the hands of Google. So you see, whenever you go on Google Maps and see the 360 street view images, on the maps that you can, look at different places. Well, that was our stuff. And then earlier today, I ran into Jack McCauley, who was one of the founders of Oculus. And he says he actually remembers my company back in the day when we were doing all these things in 360-degree video. So one of the big lessons here is it's important to find the right timing and the right application. So after that experience, I went to work for a company called Movielink, which was a joint venture of the 5 movie studios to try to download movies over the internet. They were very fearful of getting Napstered because BitTorrent was out there. And so I worked with them on a strategy to get to connected consumer electronics devices, things like the PlayStation 2 back in the day. And Movielink was also a failure. I think one lesson when you go into startups is the failure rate is actually pretty high. And it wasn't until my last startup that we actually were able to do something that was highly valued. So Movielink was too early. Timing was all wrong. There wasn't enough bandwidth. This was back in the day where 500 kilobits per second was broadband. So that company failed, and it led me to do some more consulting work among media tech companies. And I was working at Netflix at the time. And before there was Netflix streaming, they were sending DVDs through the mail. And it took 2 first-class stamps, 2 of these stamps, to actually send out a DVD and then get that DVD returned. But by the time that I was working for them, I was doing some analysis of the market, and it occurred to me that bandwidth costs had come down to about 37 cents to deliver a 500 megabyte file. And this was like kind of the big moment. And so I put an image of this stamp in a presentation to the management of Netflix, and I said, I think the time is right. And I pitched the idea to a fellow named Ted Sarandos, who was chief product officer of Netflix, chief content officer of Netflix, still is, at a meeting at CES in Las Vegas, right before the show, in a dinky casino cafeteria. And I said, the timing is right, Ted. And so we later ended up signing a deal to create one of the first connected DVD players. And Netflix was going to put their logo on the box. And so again, my startup, we were really excited again. This was going to be our big break. And then Netflix said, no, you know what? We changed our mind. We're not going to put out our own DVD player. We're actually going to force the rest of the device manufacturing industry to comply with our spec. So they just published an API and said to everyone, hey, if you want our movies, you'll need to conform to our spec. And this was the way that Netflix was really able to get their distribution, in millions of devices over a couple years period. The guy that I work with on this project, Ted Sarandos, it was recently announced that Netflix would spend $17 billion on streaming, on creating content for streaming. So Ted is the most influential person in Hollywood today. And it's all because of the idea of convergence, the intersection between Hollywood and Silicon Valley. And we're in the heart of it right here. And it's a really exciting time. And I hope that you folks, get involved in some way. Thank you.